This is the Clerk website, or I assume it's pronounced Clerk, but you can get here at clerk.com. There's a lot of small details on this website, and it packs a lot in, so I'll try to get through it relatively quickly. One example of those small details are these electrical components or circuit board components in the background. They clearly had a lot of work put into them. You can see small animations, hopefully, in the video, moving around. But they still fade into the background. So I'm always impressed when someone puts as much effort as clearly went into this background illustration when it's going to be a background illustration, right? It's faded back. It's not really trying to grab your attention. What's trying to grab your attention is this giant headline. So it's impressive how much effort they put in here. And I assume this took a long time, but it helps to sell this idea that this is a technical product. It's working behind the scenes, just like this illustration is, to do something for you. In this case, it's authentication or user management. One thing I just noticed, which is quite nice, is that this background illustration acts as a circuit board, which is usually behind the scenes. It's behind a panel. And what they've done here is there's this... the website changes to this white background, but they've added this drop shadow to suggest that this white background is a panel that's sitting in front of the circuitry in the background. So that's quite a nice transition, but also quite a nice representation of what the product does and reinforces the branding. So there's a relatively strong left and right margin on this page. Let me just show you here, so it carries on down here, and with this first section they've essentially spilled out of that to show you the product imagery, which is quite visually interesting. You know, it's a relatively off balance set of images that still hugs this text block quite nicely. But since this section stands alone and since these images spill out, it doesn't feel too bad that it sort of spills out of the margins. I think it's quite common now to see images sort of ignore the margins of a website like this. But I think it works partly because they're so bold with it. You know, they're not just having one image poke out, they're having the whole thing sort of spill out to the right and to the left, of course. You can see all these images have these dotted lines sitting around them that represent the sort of grid they're sitting in. This is a quite nice way to subtly reinforce that these images are sitting on a grid, and even though they're sort of dotted around the page, it helps them to feel that much more orderly. It really helps in this situation where they've got this, I guess it's meant to be a drop-down menu for someone's account, and they've got the avatar represented here. So they could have just moved this menu up onto this line and had it the same distance from this image above as this image on the right here. But they wanted to represent the avatar. They wanted to show that it was a drop-down menu. And what they've done here is they've included these lines so that it helps everything feel more orderly. So if you didn't have this line here that hit the top of this avatar and stretched across, you might think, oh, this gap feels a bit too big compared to this gap over here. But because they've included these lines and they've established them early on, it's quite a nice sense of orderliness, even though the gap isn't always the same size, like in this case. Separate or different from this sort of overlapping or overlay transition they used up here, they've now switched to this different transition, which is quite a technical feeling sort of blast door interconnection. I don't know how to describe this, but you often see this in science fiction films. So it has this technical feel, even though it's quite subtle, of transitioning from white to black. And again, just barely you can see some of these sort of circuitry components in the background from this light spill that comes down. It's quite nice that that light spill is coming from the whitest, the lightest section into the darkest section. It's almost as if the lighter section is casting that light, which I don't think it's supposed to be, but going from light to dark and having the light follow you in is quite a nice sort of theme or continuation. So they've switched to dark probably because this is a slightly more technical section. They've got a list of things you can do with this product, and dark backgrounds are usually used for more professional or more technical audiences in the tech world of websites. So that they've switched and they're giving you this grid layout of the different products. And these all have sort of animations that I assume took a long time to put together, represent a lot of effort. So it really engages you and helps you understand the product. Hopefully it doesn't engage you so much because you're playing with the animations that you don't actually read the text. That's always a risk, but it's quite a nice balance. And if you never hover over these, I guess you won't discover that it's animated and you'll just read the text on its own. You can see down here they've got these, there's more animations for these, but they've got these subtle lines. It might be very hard to see in the video. I don't know how the compression will, but there's very subtle lines coming off the corners of these elements. So again, they've got these subtle lines to outline the containers, add a bit more structure, similar to how they did it up here, but these are a bit more solid, you know. And yeah, they've got very nice animations for each of these sections. It's the same effect, I think, in every one, but the pixels are changing to represent the brand of whatever you're hovering over, which is a nice way to make it coherent. So you can see here these are green pixels for Superbase's green logo, and over here yellow and orange pixels for Firebase's yellow and orange logo. So that's a nice touch, shows that they care about the people they work with, which again is a nice way to sort of represent the brand. Again, here they've switched back to a light with that same transition. So you can see here the white section sort of led in to this dark section with the shape of this transition, and now it's leading out with the shape of the transition. So that's a nice echo of the transition above and below. They're still using these grids, but now they're light grids, and they've still got animations. So they sort of established, if you discover that there's these animations earlier on, then suddenly you're probably more engaged with every grid from then on, because maybe you're hovering over them to see what happens, and hopefully that focuses you more on the content than if you were just scrolling past. They've got another grid here, which is mostly testimonials, and they've done an interesting thing where usually all of these would have a sort of lighter color to represent a foreground element. They've decided to push some of those back, and they've still given them outlines to make them stand out, but they've pushed some of them back into the background by using the same color as the background, and they've decided to pick out one or two testimonials. I assume because Vercel and Stripe are quite impressive names, and so they want to highlight those. In this case, they've used the Stripe purple as the background for this container, and I assume this is the Vercel white. I mean, it's just white, but Vercel has very simple sort of bold branding, so they probably didn't have many colors they could lean on for the background of this container. But that quite nicely represents both of the brands of the companies they're talking about. So if you didn't happen to know who Patrick Collison was, or you didn't see Stripe down here or Vercel here, they've made the logo big and they've given it the branded background so that it reinforces who they're talking about. You can see here these subtle lighting effects and shadows applied to a large form of the logo for this. So if I show you here the logo, they're using that throughout their website. But down here in the call to action, they've used that logo, they've put it in white, and they've used color and shadow to essentially pick it out of the container, along with more of these illustrations in the background of the circuit components. So that's again a nice echo of what you saw at the start of the website. They've brought that background imagery down into the end of the website in this call to action section. One more thing I like, because they've been using these dotted lines to help with layout and orderliness throughout the website. One more thing I like is that they use it in a very small fashion here at the logo at the bottom left.